You know that feeling? When you're trying to wrap your head around something complex, you just wish there was like a shortcut.
Yeah, someone to just hand you the essentials.
Exactly. The stuff that really matters, that sticks. Well, that's what we do here with the Deep Dive. And today, that shortcut's designed specifically for you.
We are going deep into Ray Dalio's principles, pulling out the absolute core ideas from, his time founding Bridgewater Associates.
Right.
This book, it's really his attempt to lay out the fundamental life and management principles he used, all about pursuing truth and excellence.
And look, Principles is huge. It's a dense book.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is pretty focused.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give you the most valuable bits about why principles are so important, how you can actually learn from mistakes, because, let's face it, we all make them,
Absolutely.
and how to make genuinely better decisions.
Yeah.
In, pretty much any part of your life.
Yeah.
We're aiming for those aha moments, maybe some surprising facts, and stuff you can actually use.
Without getting totally bogged down in the detail.
Precisely. Think of us as your guides, ready to unpack all this.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is why Dalio even wrote these down. It wasn't like at the start of his career.
Yeah.
No, it was later, after a lot of success. And his main motivation, it seems, wasn't just to sell books. It was more about helping people he cared about.
People who were struggling.
Yeah, people he saw facing challenges. And he noticed this pattern. Often their problems came down to, unknowingly breaking these core principles he'd come to rely on.
Huh. It's like a master chef sharing their secret techniques, not just for fame, but so their apprentices don't make the same costly errors.
Exactly that. And it wasn't just a handful of tips either. He identified something like 200 principles, covering almost every major issue he'd run into.
200. Wow.
But the really key part, I think, is how he presents them. He's not laying down the law saying, this is the absolute truth. No, for every single principle, his core question is it true?
Is it true? For me.
Mm-hmm.
For you, the listener.
Exactly. He's actively pushing you to think critically, to compare his ideas with your own life, your own experiences, and see what actually clicks.
Right.
His hope, really, is that his principles become a starting point, something that you adapt and evolve until they become your own deeply held principles.
Kind of like learning guitar. You start with the instructor's exercises, scales, whatever, but eventually those become second nature, part of how you play.
That's a great analogy. That's the level of integration he's aiming for.
Okay.
And it's crucial to see that his management principles, the ones about running Bridgewater, they aren't separate from his life philosophy.
They're connected.
Directly, they flow right out of his fundamental life principles, which are all about dealing with reality effectively, and to get what you want out of life and avoid the common mistakes that trip people up.
So understanding his worldview is kind of essential.
Totally, because it shapes his whole approach to leading people, making decisions, everything we'll get into.
It's not just business tactics then. It starts way deeper, how you see the world.
Principles built on principles. And while we're focusing today on the life and management stuff, he does mention other types, like investment principles.
Suggesting it's a universal idea, maybe, having a framework.
I think so. Having thought through principles for different areas of life seems to be the core message.
And this wasn't some overnight realization for him, was it? These principles came from experience.
No, definitely. Shaped heavily by his early days in the markets. He's very candid about losing quite a bit of money early on.
Right, I read that.
And realizing just how incredibly difficult it is to be right consistently. And, how painful it is when you're wrong.
That must have been humbling.
A powerful catalyst, he says. It made him really want to understand what actually drives success. You see his early interest in commodities futures.
Which was a bit unusual then.
Yeah, kind of niche. Partly driven, interestingly, by low margin requirements. He was trying to leverage up, assuming he'd be right.
Youthful confidence.
Maybe a bit. And then his experience during the collapse of Bretton Woods, being right there on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when currencies went wild.
Talk about a crash course in market reality.
Absolutely. A defining moment. Even his time at Harvard Business School, he mentions the case study method.
Problem solving, debate.
Exactly. That focus on rigorous questioning, chasing the truth, you can see the seeds of his later principles there.
And then he got a Wall Street job, but it didn't stick.
Right. Didn't feel like the right fit, and eventually he was let go. Which, in hindsight, was the pivot point that led him to start Bridgewater in '75.
Okay.
And from then on, his core approach, the way he describes it, It sounds remarkably like what he did as a 12-year-old kid caddying, trying to figure out the market.
How so?
Setting his own goals, thinking independently, stress testing his ideas against smart people, being wary of overconfidence,
Yeah.
and constantly looking at the results, learning from what worked and what didn't. It's that iterative cycle.
Action, reflection, learning. Loop it.
That seems to be the engine. And he hammers this home. Many of his best lessons came straight from his mistakes.
But crucially, from reflecting on those mistakes.
Yeah.
Understanding why they happened.
Exactly. He realized success ultimately boils down to accepting reality, however uncomfortable, and dealing with it effectively.
Which brings us neatly to what he calls his most fundamental life principle.
The primacy of truth. Or, more specifically, that having an accurate grasp of reality is absolutely essential for getting good outcomes.
Makes sense. If your map is wrong, you won't reach your destination.
Precisely. Without that clear, objective view, your decisions are built on sand.
And his view of reality goes beyond just markets, right? He talks about nature.
He does. He has this deep respect for nature as this incredibly complex, brilliant system full of lessons. He seems almost awestruck by its efficiency, from the micro to the macro.
And he uses it to make some pretty challenging points about good and bad.
That's a key insight. He doesn't really see them as fixed moral things the way we often do. It's more about alignment with how reality, how nature work.
So good is working with reality.
Yeah, fostering progress, development. And bad is being in conflict with it, essentially. His point isn't to, excuse harshness, but to push you to look beyond the immediate judgment, to see the wider systemic consequences. It forces a more objective stance.
Less emotional reaction, more analysis?
Exactly. He uses that example of hyenas taking down a wildebeest.
Which sounds brutal on the surface.
Right. But then he zooms out and says, look at the ecosystem. This plays a role. It contributes to the evolution of both species through natural selection.
It forces you to consider the whole system, not just the individual event.
It really does. And this ties into another massive principle for him, that fundamental human drive to evolve.
To improve, to get better.
Yes. He believes this is one of our deepest motivators, maybe even stronger than just wanting more stuff, more material possessions.
So the new car, the big house, those aren't the real goal.
He sees them almost as bait. They're the things that lure us into striving, into overcoming challenges, developing new skills.
And it's in that process that we actually evolve.
That's his point. The growth itself is the real reward.
Interesting.
And he points out this cool synergy between, individual self-interest and what's good for society.
How does that work?
Well, when people pursue their own goals by figuring out how to provide value to others, they generally get rewarded for it.
Right. Society pays for things it wants or needs.
Exactly. He even suggests that financial success can be sort of a rough proxy for how much value someone's actually contributed. It's not just about wanting money.
That reframes success quite a bit. It's about value creation.
Yeah. And what really gives us an edge in this whole evolution game is our incredible ability to learn.
We can adapt faster than, say, genetic evolution allows.
Much faster. Our capacity to learn drives rapid improvement.
Okay, so truth, evolution, learning. What else is fundamental?
A huge one is understanding consequences, not just the immediate ones.
The first, second, and third order effects idea.
Exactly. He stresses how often the easy, tempting thing, now the first order consequence, leads to bad stuff later on.
Like exercise. First order is maybe discomfort, sweat.
Right. But second and third order are better health, more energy, longer life.
And the opposite. That tasty junk food. First order is pleasure.
Delicious. But the second and third orders might be weight gain, health problems.
So it's about looking past the immediate gratification or pain. Seeing the ripples.
Crucial for good decision-making. And one final piece in this fundamental layer is about responsibility.
Taking ownership.
Yes. He argues pretty strongly that blaming bad outcomes on external factors, on other people, it's just a dead end.
Why? Because it stops you from learning.
Precisely. If it's always someone else's fault, you're basically just wishing reality was different, which it isn't.
Right.
And more importantly, it stops you looking inward. It prevents you from seeing your role and developing the qualities you need to get better results next time.
So if you feel stuck blaming the world, Dalio would say, look in the mirror first.
That's the gist, which leads perfectly into his practical framework for getting what you want.
The 5-step process.
Yeah.
Okay, let's break it down.
Right. It's iterative, remember? A cycle. Step 1, set goals.
Sounds simple enough.
Well, he makes a really key distinction here between genuine goals, what you really want long-term, and just Desires.
Desires being,
Often those tempting first-order things that can actually pull you away from your real goals.
like my goal is financial security,
Mhm.
but my desire is that shiny new gadget right now.
Exactly. Recognizing that conflict is step one. Okay, step two. Identify problems.
The obstacles in the way of the goals.
Yes, but crucially, he pushes you to find the root causes, not just the surface stuff.
Root causes versus proximate causes. What's the difference?
Good question. Proximate cause might be, I missed the deadline. It describes the event, often with a verb. The root cause is why you missed it. Maybe it's, I lack time management skills, or I procrastinate, often described with adjectives, the underlying condition.
Like a wilting plant. Proximate cause, no water. Root cause, maybe a crack in the pot leaking water.
Perfect analogy. Fixing the root cause, patching the pot solves the problem long term. Just adding water doesn't.
Got it. So find the real why, then step 3.
Diagnose problems. This is digging even deeper into why those root causes exist, really analyzing the mechanics behind the issue.
Understand the dynamics. Okay, step 4.
Design the plan. Figure out the solutions. And this isn't just a vague idea, it's thinking it through, visualizing it, like a movie script connecting past, present, future.
And assigning roles. Who does what, when.
Absolutely. A clear roadmap from here to the goal. And finally, step 5. The obvious but often hardest part.
Doing it. Execution.
Putting the plan into action. This takes self-discipline, being proactive, focusing on results.
Tracking progress. Having benchmarks.
Essential. And being willing to ask for help if you get stuck.
So goals, problems, diagnosis, design, doing, and it loops.
Constantly. And they're all interconnected. The goals are the whole point of the designs and tasks. You should always ask why to link them back.
Makes sense.
And goals tend to change more slowly than the plans and tasks needed to achieve them, right? Those need constant adjustment.
Right. And this whole process, it's not just for individuals, is it? He applies it to groups, companies.
Exactly. He argues that clear principles are just as vital for any group. They shape the culture, how the group tackles all 5 steps.
Okay, so let's transition to those management principles. Building a great culture seems key.
Absolutely foundational. And a cornerstone for him is what he calls radical truth and radical transparency.
Sounds intense. What does it mean in practice?
It means creating an environment where difficult truths are surfaced, not hidden, even if it's uncomfortable. He believes hiding truth, even out of loyalty, just damages everything in the long run.
So like no talking behind people's backs.
That's a big one. Never say something about someone you wouldn't say directly to them.
And transparency, like sharing information openly.
Radically so. Things like recording most meetings and making them available. The goal is openness, accountability. It speeds up learning immensely.
Wow, that's different. And what about mistakes in this culture?
Mistakes are expected. They're part of pushing boundaries, innovating.
Okay.
What's not okay is failing to identify them, analyze them, and learn from them. That's the cardinal sin.
So embrace the mistake as a learning opportunity.
He literally says, love your mistakes. And use tools like issues logs to track problems systematically and figure out the root causes.
So truth, transparency, learning from mistakes. How do you keep everyone aligned?
Constant effort to get in sync, as he calls it, regularly checking that everyone's on the same page about what's true and what needs doing.
Which might involve some debate.
Oh yeah, healthy, robust debate. Fighting for right, he says. But it's a balance. You need to be assertive with your views, but also genuinely open-minded to others.
Tricky balance.
It is, and he adds a crucial layer. Not all opinions are equally valuable. He talks about believability, someone's track record, their reasoning. It gives their opinion more weight on certain topics.
So you weigh opinions based on demonstrated expertise and logic.
Exactly. But importantly, even the most believable people need to be open to challenge and questions. Disagreements aren't bad. They're how you align principles and solve things.
Okay, culture sounds demanding, but potentially powerful. What about getting the right people?
He says that's pretty much the most important decision you make, who you choose to be responsible for things.
Matching the person to the design of the role.
Yes. Understanding what attributes are truly needed for that specific job.
And when hiring, what does he look for?
Values and abilities first, skills second.
Why? Skills seem important.
Skills can often be taught, he argues, but core values, innate abilities, those are much harder to change. He even talks about looking for a certain sparkle.
That intangible quality.
Yeah, something that sets truly great performers apart, but he's also realistic. Hiring mistakes. He says they're inevitable no matter how good your process is. which makes understanding people deeply even more critical.
Their values, strengths, weaknesses.
And even their thinking styles. Left brain versus right brain, detail versus big picture, planner versus perceiver.
Recognizing those differences helps build balanced teams.
And helps put people in roles where they'll naturally thrive.
Okay, so you've got the culture, you've got the people. How do you manage effectively towards the goal?
Well, first, he distinguishes real management from micromanagement, or conversely, being too hands-off.
What's the sweet spot?
Effective management is about deeply understanding your people and the processes the machine, and constantly working to improve both. He uses a skiing together analogy.
Skiing together.
Meaning close, ongoing interaction. Observing performance in real time, giving timely feedback, constantly comparing results to the goals, and being able to step back, see the bigger picture.
So clear plans, agreed goals, and tasks are vital.
Absolutely. And people need to think like owners. Plus, constant probing.
Probing. Sounds a bit intrusive.
He means asking questions, digging deep to really understand what's going on. Not just with your direct reports, but maybe even a level down. Transparently, of course.
And getting questions back.
Encouraging that is key. And evaluations need to be accurate, not just kind. Honest feedback focusing on patterns is crucial for growth.
Using tools like performance reviews, maybe notes.
Yeah, baseball cards, he sometimes calls them. Tracking performance and attributes over time.
And training. How does that fit in?
He sees training as guiding personal evolution. Helping people learn from mistakes, acceptable ones anyway. Change takes time and reinforcement.
Which leads to the tough part, sorting.
Right, getting people into the right roles where they click. Or, if there just isn't a good fit, making the hard call to move them out of the organization.
Difficult, but necessary sometimes. Okay, last big area. Problem solving and decision-making within this system.
Again, tools like issues logs are key for perceiving problems systematically. Always driving towards those root causes, the why, not just the what happened.
And designing solutions.
Think before acting. Visualize the whole system. Consider those second and third order consequences again. Build the organization around the goals, not just tasks.
Systematize things where possible. Controls.
Definitely. Checklists for routine stuff, maybe even a double do for critical tasks, having two people do it independently to catch errors.
Smart. And making the actual decisions.
Logic is key. Focus on finding the best answer, not your answer. Understand believability. Think in terms of expected value, like probabilities and payoffs.
Avoid risking ruin.
Absolutely critical. And apply the 80-20 rule. Focus your energy on the 20% of factors that will yield 80% of the results.
Don't get bogged down in minor details.
Exactly. Consider timing, too. Is now the right time? Do I need more info, or is the marginal gain too small? Make sure the must-do things really get done.
And sometimes you need to step back for perspective.
Yes, he talks about going back before going forward. Telling the story of how you got here can clarify the path ahead.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground. As we wrap up this deep dive into Dalio's principles, what are maybe 2 or 3 key things you think offer immediate value for listeners?
Good question. For me, that relentless focus on identifying root causes is huge.
Yeah, getting beyond the symptoms.
If you just do that one thing consistently, it changes how you solve problems entirely. That's incredibly valuable.
I agree. What else?
The discipline of considering second and third order consequences.
Looking beyond the immediate.
Yes. Actively thinking through the downstream effects of your choices, that can save you so much trouble. And maybe third, his whole attitude towards mistakes.
Embracing them as learning fuel.
Exactly. Creating a culture, even just for yourself, where analyzing mistakes honestly isn't just okay, it's essential for growth. That's powerful.
Those are great takeaways. And for everyone listening, as you think about these ideas, remember Dalio's core question.
Is it true?
Is it true for you? Do these principles resonate? Do they offer a useful lens for your own challenges, your own goals?
Because this deep dive, really, it's just scratched the surface of what's in principles.
Oh, for sure.
Hopefully it's piqued your curiosity. Maybe you'll dig into the book itself or explore some areas that really stood out.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider how your own principles are evolving. Just like Dalio's were forged through his experiences, yours are constantly being shaped too. It's an ongoing journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. A continuous process of learning, adapting, and refining what works best for you.